Hi, welcome everyone. We are now recording. So my name's Mike Zawina. I'm one of the committee here at the Bristol Fundraising Group, and I'm really excited to be joined by Hannah Kowszun for today's session, which is called Your Fundraising Job, Love It or Leave It. Hannah is a freelance consultant on a mission to transform how smaller social impact organizations invest in their people and provide support to fundraisers, as well as helping organizations to develop fundraising strategies. Hannah, I'm sure we'll talk about this more in a few moments, but she's previously done some research into what makes fundraisers stay in their jobs or not stay in their jobs, and will be guiding us through a process of reflection, exploring how you can look at sort of what things you can change about your role and what you can't, and how to build up the confidence and clarity to kind of ask for what you need to make your role a success. So, Hannah, I'm going to hand over to you and pin you so everyone can see you, and I will let you kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you today. I have slides, of course I do. That's what all of these things are about. So I will share those with you. So yes, the session. Congratulations, you're the first ones to learn about my new initiative called People and Purpose. I have a website. You forced me to make a website. So I will send the link round at the end of the session. So my name's Hannah Kowszun, that's how you say it. I've worked in charities for about 20 years, which is very freaky saying out loud because that's a long time, but it doesn't feel like it feels like forever and no time at all. In 2019, I enrolled in an organizational psychology master's. Organizational psychology explores behavior in the workplace. I'd spent quite a lot of time at quite a lot of dysfunctional organizations, and I wanted to understand why. So, as part of my studies, I had to do a dissertation. And I chose to do it in why charity staff turnover is so high. Um, because it's academic, you have to use academic terminology. So the things that I looked at were what's called pro-social motivation, which is basically a innate desire to want to have positive impact on society. A sense of your job having positive impact. It was called task significance, but it was a quite common idea there. And then contact with beneficiaries. Were any of these things, did they affect voluntary turnover? And the answer is no, none of them did. Instead, what I learned was that job satisfaction was hugely correlated with turnover. That's not a surprise. That's what most academics find. But the thing that was interesting was autonomy, having a sense of autonomy and having a sense of variety in your skills, being able to use different types of skills and high level skills were statistically significant and had an impact. Now, just to explain, my original dissertation was about all charity staff, but no one was interested in publishing that. Take with that what you will. Instead, Regare, the fundraising think tank, were interested in publishing it if I did the subset. So about 28% of my participants were fundraisers. So what I did was I took out that participant set and I looked at what affected their turnover. So this is for fundraisers. And interestingly, contact with beneficiaries did affect turnover among non-fundraisers. It didn't for fundraisers. So it's quite an interesting bit of research. What I've done is I put in the link the main research so that if you are interested, you can look at it. Now, when Mike and I were talking about me doing this, I realized that the recommendations I made in the Regare thing, I wasn't allowed to make recommendations in the dissertation because it's too academic. It's not practical. Academics don't think it's practical. But in the Regare thing, I was allowed to kind of make recommendations. And I realized most of my recommendations were kind of strategy level or manager level, that kind of having some kind of control. And the vast majority of us don't have that much control over how an organization runs. Even if we're in senior roles, we realize that we don't actually have that much influence. So what Mike and I explored was how can I kind of make the findings of that research relevant to individuals? And the things that make work worthwhile are motivations that are intrinsic, motivations that are extrinsic. I'll explain what they mean a bit more a bit later. What's called hygiene factors. So the idea that you are literally safe at work, that you are paid enough to live. Like, these are very practical things that make work worthwhile, because if you're not safe, if you're not able to pay your bills, you aren't in a secure enough position to actually enjoy your work. And then lots of things that work together. And just a quick one on intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. They are not right or wrong. And by the way, fundraisers, I use this when I work with people on fundraising strategy as well, that donors will have intrinsic motivations and extrinsic motivations for why they give. It's quite a useful way of thinking about it. So intrinsic is that idea that it's an internal driver for how you feel. So your intrinsic motivation would be that your values, your aims, what you want to achieve in life, how you feel about yourself is what aligned with your motivation. Extrinsic is much more external. So the idea that you do return a full or even excessive return for what you give. It improves your reputation. The idea is that externally there is something that supports what you're doing or your motivations. They are not right or wrong. They are simply the motivations that work for you. And you won't have just one or other. There will be ones working together. So go back to what makes work worthwhile. These are some brilliant lines which you might recognize, because it's what Mike wrote in his brilliant LinkedIn post. We want influence over what happens. I don't know. I have worked with fundraisers who seem to not care that much about what the charity's doing. They just want to get the money in, and well done to them. They're usually very good at it. But quite a lot of us do want to know that it's being used well. We might want to push for things for colleagues. We might want career progression. We might want to feel like we're rewarded fairly. And I'm glad that Mike put that in there, because remuneration is really important. So all of this together, academic research, thinking about implications for individuals, I wanted to provide some kind of product or service that supported, quote unquote, the little people, like the normal people, the ones who are working every day and don't get invited to 3-hour senior team meetings, and feel differently about their work. So I was inspired by the Channel 4 TV program, Love It or List It. Hands up if you know it. Yeah, it is a property show on Channel 4 with Kirsty and Phil, who are like Madonna. I don't even know what their surnames are anymore. They're just Kirsty and Phil. If you don't know it, the premise is really simple and quite clever, actually, in its simplicity. You have a couple. They have a property. One of them wants to stay in it. One of them wants to leave. So what happens is Phil takes them on tours of different properties they could buy in their area, and Kirsty develops this big old renovation plan to try and fix whatever problems are going on with the property. Now, quick word of warning, if you are thinking of watching it, it is not the most diverse of programs. They almost always have heterosexual couples. And they almost always have the woman say she wants a bigger kitchen and a utility room, while the man kind of looks side-eyed and says that's her job. So turns out the 1950s are alive and thriving on Channel 4 property programs. I just warn you in advance. But what I noticed was very, very clear trends. So they force people at the end of the program to say whether they're going to love it or list it. Are they going to stay or are they going to go? They've looked at what the options are. They've tried to fix the problems. What are they going to do? And usually location was the reason why they stayed or they left. We're about to have a baby and my mum's 100 miles away. They're almost certainly going to go live. The other thing was that the problem was fixed and the person who wanted to leave was like, actually, it's okay now. Or the problem couldn't be fixed. So for example, they realized outdoor space was really important to them, but they couldn't make their garden any bigger. So that was the trend. So I found myself thinking, actually, this idea of what can be fixed, what can't be fixed, what are the things, can you do a bit of looking around? Can you do a bit of introspection? So I thought, we've got you, we've got your job, we've got what makes you want to stay, and we've got what makes you want to leave. And rather than there being some kind of DIY practical aspect to it, actually a lot of it is emotional. A lot of it is things that are vying with each other that aren't as simple as, am I being paid enough? It's usually a bit more sophisticated than that. We're sophisticated people. And so I put this thing together. And I'm going to warn you, this is something I've devised. It's not a framework that's kind of out there in the world, although probably someone has come up with it because very few things are completely new. But this is a bit like a stakeholder radar, if anyone's seen one of these. The idea is that you've got two axes that work together to help you identify where someone is in their space. And the first axis is this, oh dear, I forgot to do a thing. Your focus is potentially really on work, on your work and your career, or actually your personal focus is really outside work. And so I gave two examples of this. I don't know for people who've watched The West Wing, this is in series 1. And Leo McGarry is the chief of staff and his wife is really unhappy. And she says, I can't do this. And he says, it is my job is more important than my marriage right now. I don't know if you can see it. I've got subtitles, but it's quite small. But that is him saying to his wife, my job is more important than my marriage. So this is an example of someone who has said, you know what? Yes, I have a daughter, I have a wife, I have a life outside, but my absolute focus is my work or career. On the other side, I have Ron Swanson. For anyone who has watched Parks and Recreation, he has a job, but he doesn't want it. He's a libertarian who doesn't believe in local government, and yet he works in local government. His focus, he makes beautiful chairs, he drinks whiskey. Like, this is a man who comes to work, but it is not what drives him. And in fact, I used to manage someone who's really into drag. It is something they are so passionate about. And people would say, you're so clever, you're so capable, you could do more. And they're like, I don't want to. I don't want to. Like, where I want to spend my energy, my creativity is in my drag. What I want is a job that pays me enough to enjoy it. So that idea, outside work, the cliche is women raising children. But that's why I didn't want to use that picture. The cliche is, oh, you're raising a child. Actually, focus outside work is much more nuanced than that. And you will be somewhere on that spectrum. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's how it is for you, where your utter focus is that work, that career, or it's really not work or career. It's something that's not that. So where are you on that spectrum? The second spectrum, I want to say, this is not something your employer can influence. This is not something your organization, your charity has any influence over, nor should they. They should not be telling you where your focus is when it comes to work, career, or outside work. This is your life. So they can't influence it. It also might not be in your control, at least for periods of time. So my example I would give is that when my daughter was born, we found out she has a disability. And suddenly she needed to have heart surgery. Now, our original plan was that I would do 6 months of maternity leave, go back to work, and then my husband would do paternity leave. But because my husband's self-employed and because we knew her surgery probably would be around when she was around 9-10 months old, in the end it was when she was 11, it made more sense for me to be on maternity leave for 11 months, which was really painful money-wise. But that focus, I mean, I couldn't have cared about work if I tried at that period of time. So sometimes where you are on that might not be something you can control, but it's best to at least recognize where you are with that. So the job focus is the idea in that radar of, is your focus on this job? Are you a comfortable cat cozy in your chair and like, you know, this job is fine. You may not love it. You may love it, but the point is that you are fully comfortable in the role you've got. On the other side, you've got this kind of, what else is out there? Your focus, if you're thinking about where your brain is at, you're not really in this job. Your focus is, what am I doing next? That could be a promotion internally. You know, it doesn't have to be outside your organization, but the point is, I'm done with this job. I'm done with this job and I want to look elsewhere. So on that, this is where we potentially have most influence and control, because this is where it's like, well, where am I? Am I comfortable, or am I itching? So what I wanted to really kind of hone down is, what are these factors that are potentially affecting where you sit on that radar? And bearing in mind, some of these, you could be on, you could change where you are on that radar within a 12-hour period. I mean, I know I've been in that situation. And what I've done is I've looked at the factors affecting this job and next job, not the outside work, inside work, because that's not something that you have as much control over. So if you are comfortable, if your focus is on this job and your probably focus is outside work, it's most likely because it's meeting your current need for balance, whatever that balance is. It's probably because it pays enough. Maybe not as much as you'd like, but enough. It may be because your employer understands and respects the fact that outside work, work and career is not your thing. And to be honest, I think that's something that as a sector, we should be better at. I am of the belief we are a unique sector. We should have a unique approach to how we support our people. We shouldn't read airport books by the chief executive of Google and then say, let's take their ideas and stick them in our organization. I think we should be unique. And I think that idea that you must always be looking for next, you must always be taking leadership things or management things. Actually, I think we should recognize that if someone's comfortable with where they're at, we empower them to be comfortable with where they're at. We don't see it as a failing. So your employer understands that and says, great, keep doing the best job you can do. I understand where your focus is. The flip side of that is you just might not have energy. You might be exhausted. And the idea of even looking for another job, like that anything could be different, is just outside of your realm of you just don't have any energy for it. So fine, I'll do this job. Those might be the factors that are affecting where you're at there. If, however, your focus is outside work, but you're also kind of nosing around thinking, what's the next job? It might be because you need a better balance. You know, like this organization's not really giving you the balance you need. It doesn't pay enough. Again, it's okay to say it doesn't pay enough. Let's be honest about it. We have needs, we have mortgages, maybe we have hobbies. You're allowed to spend money on yourself. You are allowed to spend money on yourself. Your employer doesn't understand you. And now it feels like enough is enough. That's the kind of complete opposite version of the energy thing, where your energy has just gone, oh my God, I need to be out. Oh my God. And that's potentially a factor affecting how you feel. Then you've got that idea that if you are someone who is much more motivated by your work or your career, what is motivating you to stay in this job? This is, if you are a manager, if you are in any kind of way responsible for your organization, these are the people you're probably most excited to have working for you. The ones that put all their work in, all their thoughts into their work or career, which benefits you, and they are comfortable, they're doing a good job, they're comfortable in their job. So it's because it's meeting your need for progress or competence. It's giving you a chance to use those skills, develop those skills, learn those skills without having to do a different job to do that. It pays you enough. It satisfies your values. It goes back to intrinsic thing. You know, you're in a cause that you really care about and you're excited about doing it. And then that you do feel a sense of autonomy. You feel respected as a professional. You feel like you have control over what you're doing. These are so important. And I think too many managers and organizations don't realize how they say they trust people, but they don't treat them like they trust them. If, however, you're not happy in your job, you want to think about the new one, it might be because you're bored. I wrote a Substack about this the other day. There's an organization that I have been working with apprentices on, and there's one of the apprentices was shocked at the turnover, shocked. And she was like, I think they're bored. I think they're given the same targets every month, the same job to do, and they don't get a chance to innovate. And you're like, yeah, that's really boring. It might not pay enough. You might be frustrated with the organization. And believe me, as a fundraiser, you can really do that. Why am I raising this money? What are you actually doing with this money I'm raising? And then you've got that sense that you don't actually feel like you've got control. You don't feel respected. Maybe someone else will do it. So when you're thinking about these kind of factors, you start to uncover what your non-negotiables are. Now, what links a bath, jumping off a boat, and honesty? They're my non-negotiables. My husband was now husband, at the time of boyfriend. He looked at this flat that we were going to get together, and he knew I needed to have a bath. He knew it was a non-negotiable. When we were planning our honeymoon, he knew, and I knew, I needed at some point during the honeymoon to jump off a boat. It's just me. And in our relationship, honesty is really important, and that extends to really small things, not kind of getting used to not telling each other stuff, but just really being honest. And I think one of the things I think is really valuable when you're reflecting isn't just what you think, but what others think. So when you're non-negotiables for work for me is flexibility for raising my daughter. As I mentioned, she had heart surgery. It went well, yay! But she is vulnerable, just generally health-wise. So there is a flexibility I need there that I didn't. My last employer was brilliant. They were really good at flexibility, but you can't always be sure that a new employer is going to be like that. I want at least 32,000 after tax per year. Ideally more, ideally a lot more. But I was offered a contract recently and it just wouldn't cover my costs. And so knowing what my baseline is, what I'm trying to aim for, is really valuable. And I think we don't always do that calculation in our head that says, what's our baseline? What are the costs we want to have in order to spend on ourselves as well as our needs? And then the other non-negotiables, I really need to feel like my ideas are listened to. I think I have good ideas. I hope you think so too, because you're listening to some of them now. But too many of the organizations I've worked for either didn't want to, they saw it as criticism. Oh my God, the worst one was they'd hire a consultant in who gave exactly the same ideas I had and they got paid for it and listened to, and I didn't. Hands up if that's happened to you. So one of the reasons why I'm freelancing, why I'm consulting, is because at least for the moment, I feel like I'm able to meet these non-negotiables. And any job I look at, particularly that last one, I don't really know at the moment if that job would give me that. So for now, I'm kind of sticking with what I've got. So on that spectrum, on that radar, I'm kind of in that sticking with this job. Focus is mainly outside work. And then occasionally I might pop over, usually when I want more money. But then when you're thinking about your non-negotiables, it's not just yours, it's what would others say are your non-negotiables. Because self-awareness is much rarer than we should have. It's quite hard to be self-aware, and often having someone else reflect to you the things that frustrate you or the things that you really enjoy can be quite an eye-opener. So when you're reflecting on this stuff, what are your non-negotiables, but what would others say, particularly those you love and know you best? And then finally, because we are about almost at my 25 minutes, when you're thinking about that phrase, your job, love it or leave it, I think it's worth recognizing that there are things you could fix. And in Mike's blurb, there was that idea of confidence to ask for stuff. I can't give you innate confidence, but if you're more sure of yourself and your needs, you are likely to be more confident about advocating for yourself, especially if there's not that many of them. So the challenges that you're finding in your job, which ones do you think could be fixed? And have you even asked? But which ones can't be fixed? So the energy to try and fix your job is important energy to put in. The energy to find a new job, especially because you don't want to just, I mean, I've done this, just quit with nowhere to go. And suddenly you're like, uh-oh, what am I going to, oh my God, Finding a new job can take time and it really takes energy. So rather than simply say, I want to leave it, I want to love it, do you want to try fixing it first? Do you want to ask those questions? And if you think it can't be fixed, then that gives you permission to say, okay, I tried. Maybe I need to find something else. But now I know what my non-negotiables are. Now I can go into the job hunting thing and say, do you have any questions for us? Yes, I noticed that you said this. Is that actually true? Things like that. Whew, sorry, I've thrown a lot at you. So my question to you, so my summary, sorry, is there is no right or wrong. If you feel you want, you deserve and you need a certain amount of money, there's no right or wrong in that. There's only right for you. If your focus is work, career, yes, you have a husband and a child, but actually your focus is career, that's fine. That's right for you. So try not to apply judgment on your choices. These are choices that are right for you. And identify what does feel right. Consider asking for what you want or need. At least ask. If they say no, you know where you stand. If you assume they're going to say no, you haven't given them a chance to prove you wrong. And then finally, manage your energy for either fix or find, because if you try to do both, you'll only be exhausted. So Mike and I were thinking that we could give you a chance to maybe chat in small groups about if any of this resonates. Tricky because you might be in jobs, you might know each other, but it might, at very least, if we're talking about your non-negotiables, it might be something useful to bounce off someone else. That's my bit. That's my presentation done.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was fascinating. I've been jotting down some questions and thoughts, and actually, so much of this seems relevant to people in any jobs beyond fundraising and even beyond the charity sector. So I will be nudging some people in the direction of your presentation for sure. But yeah, Hannah says we wanted to, rather than going straight into a Q&A today, I think these questions are quite sort of deep and require a bit of thought. We wanted to give you a few minutes in breakout rooms with, I think I've set them up so there'll be 3 or 4 people in each room, just to have an opportunity to talk about any aspect of this that you like, if you feel comfortable doing so. And if you don't for whatever reason, that's absolutely fine as well. Feel free to say that. So I think, Hannah, if we give people maybe a little tiny bit under 10 minutes to just have those conversations, I will pause the recording, so nothing you say in the breakout rooms will be recorded. So please feel free to speak frankly, and then we'll get people back. And if anyone wants to share feedback with us as to what they're thinking, or just questions that have come up either during Hannah's presentation or during your discussions, then we'll have another sort of 15 minutes or so for those. But yeah, huge thank you to Hannah for everything so far. We've definitely got some questions we're going to tackle in a few minutes, but I'm going to pause the recording there, and you should see an invitation to join a breakout room on your screen in just a second. For anyone listening back later, obviously hang around and you'll magically be back with us in just a second. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone, from the breakout rooms. I know that time goes really quickly, but I hope it was an opportunity to reflect and share a couple of thoughts with a fellow fundraiser. We are going to open the floor now to questions, comments, thoughts, anything you want to share. Just a reminder, we are recording again, so please only say something that you feel comfortable appearing on the recording. If you would like to ask a question anonymously, you're more than welcome to message me directly in the chat box rather than messaging everyone. And I will take that as a cue to ask your question, but not read out your name. So you're welcome to do that if it's helpful. I was about to say you can also use the react button at the bottom and raise your hand that way, but Georgie has already found that. So Georgie, will come to you first if you've got a question or a thought you'd like to share with Hannah.
Yeah, it was really interesting and really useful. I think the thing that kept on coming up in my head of going from one end of the spectrum of like, I was completely devoted, I was absolutely passionate, and everything about my life is my job, to the other end um, of like, I'm here for the pay as long as it pays well or covers everything else I want to do in my life. But I think because at the moment I'm in a really happy place and I really love where I am. I mean, of course, I could get paid more, of course, but and that's great. But there is like, oh, I do need to sort of also think about the future, but it's quite hard to think about that future and the next step and like the career I would wish to build whilst I'm actually really comfortable and happy. It's almost like I only ever think about that when I'm back in the kind of like, I hate this, where am I going kind of place. And I don't want to let that drift out. It's not really a question. I don't know if it's a question, but that's a comment maybe.
It's a
Yeah.
brilliant comment. It's actually it's that classic thing of I don't know if anyone watches The Expanse, absolutely brilliant sci-fi program on Prime. And there, I was thinking about this the other day, and one of they've got Mars that's trying to terraform, and you've got Earthers who live on Earth and they don't appreciate the fact that they can breathe easily. And one of the Martians says to an Earther, "You've forgotten how to dream. We live under we take every breath we take is because it's been given to us from our hard work, whereas you just simply breathe without thinking about it." And I think there is that challenge of like, what does inspire you to dream if you're comfortable? What does do it? And I would say it's a little bit like when you do strategy stuff with organizations that you say, what does success look like in 5 years? And the vast majority of the time, for anyone that's done a kind of strategy session with people, most people don't really care. They don't really want to do a strategy. They're like, let's just keep doing what we're doing. And so you're kind of being forced to be in that place. And so I would say, speak to your network, professional or personal, say to them, like, ask me some tough questions. Ask me what if it's a bit extreme, but that like, what would I write on my obituary? What are the things, or even just embody a moment that says, what could I do more of? What could I do better? So imagine yourself as your own strategy workshop. Um, but like, don't go so far that you get scared and untethered. Like, come back to your happy. I'm so pleased to hear that you like your job. That's brilliant. Yay. Does that help?
Yeah, Georgie's nodding. Thanks,
Yes.
Hannah.
You're
Yes,
good.
it does. Thank you. Yeah, it's good advice. Thank you.
And as a shameless plug, Hannah, because I know we both run strategy workshops, I think sometimes there's a value in having someone external as part of that process. And I was really interested that you said in your session, not just like, what are my non-negotiables, but what do people around me think are. I could see a lot of these things we talked about today working better with a kind of honest conversation with someone close to you, but like completely separate from your workplace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chloe, you've got a hand up. Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, Hannah and well, anyone, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on sort of in our group. I think the theme of our discussion, we didn't use these words, but I'd say it's quite on like the grass is greener. Like how do you know when to make that call? And to share from my personal experience, about a year ago, I left a job that was definitely a comfort job. I loved it. But I just felt this, I should take the next step. And I've had, I had a disastrous job that I left within 6 months, and now I'm doing a maternity cover contract that I do like, but it's going to end. And how I keep on really beating myself up about how I thought the grass would be greener and it hasn't been. and it's sort of given me a little bit of an existential crisis over like, well, how do I trust myself to make the next decision correctly? And I know that I think we were all sort of having that conversation in our group. There was someone who, you know, fundraising's hard, but they love where they work. Or do you stay self-employed, or do you go into the structure and comfort of like an organization? And I'd just be really interested to hear your thoughts on how you sort of can best make that assessment, and then also like not beat yourself up if maybe you get it wrong.
Oh, Chloe, I mean, that word should, you know, again, it comes back to you should want to do this. You should. I think fundraising tends to be quite female heavy as well. And I think women tend to be a bit more susceptible to being told what we should do. I hate that. We need to change it. But don't lose confidence in yourself because of it. We all make mistakes. Like things always go wrong. Like I was saying this the other day, chefs, you know how chefs do like amazing knife work? They couldn't do amazing knife work from day one. They had to cut their fingers to shreds for months and months and months. But for some reason, when we're in our kind of work, we're not allowed to cut our fingers. We're not allowed to be really bad at knife work for a few months. We're expected to just roar straight into the knives. I feel like we don't do enough practice training, you know, putting ourselves in those uncomfortable positions where we're cutting our fingers up, knowing that at some point down the line we'll be able to julienne a tomato in 10 seconds. Like, so see it as that part of that building your muscles, building your strength, not something that you did badly. You didn't. You were learning. We're all learning. And I can't promise you your next decision will be a good one or a bad one, but things that are right for you, it's okay. You don't have to be ambitious. You don't have to be a homebody. Does that help? Yeah. Anyone else got thoughts? Sorry, I realize I'm talking a lot.
I was just going to say, Hannah, I think I see more and more these days people celebrating squiggly careers is the phrase I see quite a lot, where they've done like different things and gone in different directions. And I wonder if that idea of the traditional like linear career doesn't exist so much anymore. And it's great to see people embracing that. Sometimes we need the sideways step or the backward step, and even if it goes wrong, it kind of shows you what you, by definition, what you do value, because you realize what doesn't work for you. So I think you can be in a better place long term as a result of those little missteps along the way, maybe.
Yeah.
Chloe, feel free to come back in if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think that applies to sort of, well, certainly the other people in our group as well, about, you know, it's okay to learn from, you know, every decision is going to be the best one you've ever made. And yeah, they're learnings. And I just think it's so interesting as well. I reckon, I mean, like I'm in my 30s, like this is a long time ago, but at school, you're always told that like progress is linear, right? And there is a natural next thing for you to go to. And it just feels sort of like the working world sometimes isn't set up amazingly for when you don't want to just take the next natural step.
Don't start me on what's wrong with our education system. Leave me.
Or me on capitalism and growth and always going upwards and forwards and bigger and better and that kind of thing as well. Alex, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I guess less of a question, more kind of something that I've noticed that I've been trying to work on is the around kind of recognizing when I'm putting my personal life first and then when I'm putting work first. And I think a lot of the time in fundraising, you do need to do that based on what area you work in. I work in community events and some corporate, so there are certain times of the year where I just have to say goodbye to my social life, December being the biggest one. And it's, yeah, been a bit of a learning curve, definitely with a few areas where I've needed to take some time off of work because I've been burnt out. And I think that it's, yeah, something where it's always kind of a bit of a balance, really, across the areas that we're working in.
And I think knowing more about fundraising options means that you can say things like, I'm just throwing out their legacies, for example, is you could say, do you know what? I don't want to have to balance. I don't want to have to work Saturdays. Why don't I move into that? Like, yeah, I really, thanks, Alex.
I think we were saying while people in rooms as well, Hannah, like it's perfectly fine if those needs and motivations change over time as well, like at different stages of your life. And your career, there might be things you're more or less happy to put up with and value more or less. Emma, do you want to go next?
Just unmuting myself. Yeah, I think the charity sector is particularly bad at allowing people to balance the kind of the personal and the professional. There is, because it's it is value driven, it's cause related, it's all of those sorts of things. It feels very it feels very thin skinned, I think, in a lot of ways. And it feels very difficult to just be able to just say, okay, I've had enough. I've walked away, I'll walk away. And I did that once, about 15 years ago. I walked away from a chief exec job because I knew something had to give. And eventually I realized it had to be, the job, not me and the rest of my family. So, but it felt incredibly painful to do that. And it's taken me 15 years to figure out that what happened was that I'd simply burnt out. But, and I've tried really hard to kind of balance things ever since. But it does feel very difficult, I think. And I think the whole sector isn't very good at recognizing that. I think we're getting better at it now. But when I first came into the sector 30 years ago, and I came into the community sector, we were working with local organizations, local communities for whom things were being done for them. So you kind of had to go with them. So it got, it did encourage that sense of sort of, you've got to give your all, and nothing but. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe different parts of the sector are different. I don't know. I couldn't say, having primarily worked in local regeneration type causes. So
yeah, I think that's why I'd quite like to push this on managers and organizations, or that they might want people who love this job, but they're focused on work, but love the other type as well. Respect that choice. Do a good job, but go home at 4:30. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's okay. Yeah.
And you get loyalty in return for that, don't you? I think people that their job might not be the be all and end all, but if they get to do other things around it, like, they learn to love it in a different way. And I think that's important as well. I was just going to ask, I mean, in some ways related to Emma's question, I think having the confidence to ask for what you feel you need, particularly when it's pay, and we're in a sector where we can all have that thought of, like, any money going in my pocket isn't going towards the cause, and how do I justify that? And we've touched on that power dynamic as well, like fundraisers were probably more likely to be younger and more likely to be female, and then CEOs and chairs and things like that are probably more likely to be older and more likely to be male, and that makes it more difficult. So if you've gone through the sort of process you've talked about, and you're thinking, well, no, actually, there's a really good reason why I need 3,000, 5,000 more or whatever a year to do what I want. Like, how would you go about asking for that internally? Like, would you link it back to the process you've been through and the things you've realized, or would you make it about your contribution or your worth? Or it's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think both. I think being really practical about it, being able to say, rather than feeling like it's an emotional choice, saying, I have bills, things have got more expensive, and I know I'm doing a good job. You don't have to say I'm worth it. You can say, look, I'm doing a good job. But equally, you can also kind of start that conversation. I think people are so nervous to tell, like, when you're trying for a new job and you're doing interviews and you're not telling anyone and it's all a secret. And I mean, I'm very naive in this. I'm very optimistically naive, saying to your manager, this is what I want, and them saying we can't give it to you, and saying that's fair enough, I'm going to keep doing a good job, but I need to go find somewhere that does. That helps everyone. I mean, you could even reduce your notice period. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it helps everyone because the manager's able to say, okay, we can start planning for what the next person is. You can go have interviews without having to hide that you're doing them. I mean, when I tell people this, they're like, oh, you're so naive. People aren't honest. Well, maybe we should be, for crying out loud, as a sector. If we can't be honest with ourselves, what's the point? Hiding things all the time. Ugh, hate it. You can see why I'm not in a payroll job anymore.
But I also think, Hannah, like I've seen so many fundraisers that have pushed for what they wanted and not got it, and then handed in their notice, and then suddenly, miraculously, their manager has gone, "Oh, maybe we could give you that," and it's too late. Like they've disengaged. So I think having that honest conversation earlier can help as well.
Absolutely. And also the other thing to be aware of, and I've had this happen 2 times, you leaving will not change anything. No one cares. Even if your CEO, I mean, Emma will know this, even if your CEO goes, "That's it, you're crap, I'm off," they might have a like, "Oh, maybe it's a," no one cares. So put yourself forward, put your own needs first. Don't imagine that the organization has any loyalty to you. They don't. Like, it's nice to imagine they do, but they don't. Sorry. That's a really brutal thing to say.
I think that's quite a nice point to end on, to be honest, in a way, Hannah. I think we've all, in that moment where we're feeling burnt out and frazzled, like we really internalize it all and we think it's the be all and end all. And I think remembering that it's not is really important, isn't it? But we are out of time. If anyone has any follow-up questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat box, and we'll figure out a way of sharing any responses. I want to say a huge thank you to Hannah. It's been brilliant. It's been just what I kind of hoped the session would be when we were talking about it in advance, and I've certainly found it really helpful, and I can see lots of people adding some really nice comments and thumbs up in the chat box as well. So thank you so much for joining us. I know you've shared your website and contact details in the chat box. It might get a bit buried now, but we'll put it in the follow-up afterwards as well.
Just to say, it's a completely new thing I've launched, so please give feedback on it. If you're like, "Oh no," just let me know.
And on that note, perfect segue, because I was going to say we will share the feedback form now. I think someone on the committee will have that Emma's about to pop it in the chat box. Please do take. Oh, Sophie's got there first. Thank you.
We've both done it.
We've got it there twice. That's fine. Please do spend a few minutes to share feedback, because we will look at it, we will read it, we will talk about session ideas for future sessions. So a couple of minutes of your time would be hugely appreciated. And our next event is with another brilliant consultant in the sector, so David Burgess of Apollo Fundraising, who's doing a session which I think has a brilliant title, if nothing else, "The Four Horsemen of the Grant Apocalypse," it is called. So it's going to be very trust fundraising focused. So Sophie, I know you're here. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say about that session. I don't have all the details to hand, but feel free to.
Thanks, Mike. I think we're going to send out a mailing shortly after this session. We didn't want to confuse things, but we are actually squeezing in a very early November session and a very late November session, what with it being the festive period. So I believe that we're going to be sending out mailing shortly, but join Mike, and it's going to be on the 26th of November.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and especially again to Hannah. We will leave it there. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a lovely rest of the day. Enjoy your job.